Welcome to Berries in the Interim podcast, where we explore the cutting edge of innovative clinical trial design for the pharmaceutical and medical industries, and so much more. Let's dive in.
All right, so welcome everybody back to In the Interim. I'm your host, Scott Berry, and I have a guest today, a statistician, and it's not uncommon on this show. We have other Berries, so I have another Berry you've probably not been introduced, but another statistician who is not at Berry Consultants. Most of the Berries you meet are at Berry Consultants. So my brother Tim Berry is a guest today on In the Interim. Welcome, Tim.
Yes, thank you, Scott. That's the first time I've been called a statistician in a while, so that's exciting. And I happen to be actually right down the lake from Scott here, so we're in a good spot here.
Yep. You can almost see Tim's house through the window there. Okay, so let's see. So you said it's a long time since you've been called a statistician. Let's talk about the career and what more people call him nowadays. In that, so your career as a statistician started. We were both at the University of Minnesota, and you got your master's degree at the University of Minnesota, and Interestingly, you took a class from your father. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. It was weird. It was weird. I saw my dad, Don, in action, and in some of the sports he would coach me in, he would always be a lot harder on me in those sporting events. But actually in this class, he took it nice and easy on me. And so I was surprised for that. But yes, that was a great experience for me.
So I've worked with Dad for many years, but I never took a class from him. I think both you and our sister Jen actually had him as a professor, which is an interesting experience for all. Okay, so and your thesis project for your master's, I believe, was a Bradley Terry model predicting baseball games, even incorporating pitcher.
It was one of my passions, still is my passion, is sports and using the numbers and data and analytics in the sports world. And it was the model was predicting whether one team would beat another in baseball. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of data. There was, I remember we had to ship out, we had to go to Elias Sports Bureau to get some of that data. Not our data is readily available across the web. But anyway, used some unique predictors and built a Bradley Terry model to predict the odds that one team would beat another team. And then I actually applied it in real life and to see how good I was. And that's a theme throughout my career, and my passion in using statistics is to see if I'm right, see the answer. And did a lot of kind of back testing, actually pretended to bet on games. And good news and bad news. The good news is the model was better than the bookies at predicting who would win a baseball game. The bad news is there's something in sports and betting called the VIG, or the gap between just because I was better than the bookie, they put a 7%, 5% cushion on top of that. And I think I was 2% better. So I had to scrap that model and realize I wouldn't be able to make money in that. It was good. I enjoyed that one.
And very much a precursor to your career. So, and that was about 1990, I believe, somewhere in that, where, and by the way, Tim and I took classes together at the University of Minnesota, and I went off to graduate school, and you got a job at that point.
Got a job.
So, master's in statistics from Minnesota. What's the first job?
So the first job is I was debating and with Scott and my dad whether I would stay within academia. and whether I was, and I barely skated by with my master's degree, cut by my thesis, and I was very anxious to get out in the business world, to get out of academia and start. I've been learning my whole life. I was tired of learning. I decided it's time to get out there and apply some of these wares. So it took me a while I had a lot of opportunities. There was entry level opportunities within the pharmaceutical world. I almost took a job there. I had 3 or 4 opportunities, and actually coaching from my dad was, as a master's degree person engaging in pharmaceutical companies, you might not get the opportunity than if you had a PhD. And so that was kind of helped me to make a decision. And I ended up taking a job at AT&T Bell Laboratories. And this is back in the day that AT&T was a monopoly in the long distance world. Cellular was just coming on. And the job there was how do I help use the data that we had within AT&T to drive business decisions, better business decisions, and more informed business decisions. And I remember one of the first projects I was working on was the likelihood that a AT&T consumer would disconnect from AT&T and go to MCI, right? And back in those days, there was a battle for long distance subscribers to the point where they were offering people money to come over. And so AT&T had a big retention effort. And so we built a big logistic regression model that predicted the probability that someone being the AT&T consumer would disconnect and go to MCI. And actually, I remember we built it on big mainframes. I remember the first time I submitted the model, because it ran on millions and millions of records. It took 2.5 weeks to run. Now that same model takes less than sub-second timing to run. And interesting enough, by the way, that then when we ran the model, we did multiple iterations of it. We decided it was pretty good. It was better than the treatment that they were applying. And we scored everybody in the U.S. population. We put them into deciles. And then the question was, what do you do with those deciles? Meaning, if you knew, here's 10% of the people that are highly likelihood of disconnecting and go to MCI, where do you target, and how do you keep them from leaving? So there was multiple iterations there.
Full-blown experiment. So are you randomizing that you give an incentive to somebody in the 10th percentile and you don't somebody else? And like your baseball example, you get to figure out, are you right?
Yeah, you get to figure out where the right one. One of these we missed there, though, interesting enough, is we took the top decile, the people most likely to leave, and we did a full experimental design. We did multiple treatments. And then we watched to see the impact those treatments had on whether someone would leave or not. One of the things, and there was, I don't remember off the top of my head, but there was probably 5 or 6 different treatments, and there was only one that worked, and that was a win-back check. You had to offer the person money. I know, thank you for being a valued AT&T customer. Here's $100 for staying, right? And that then moved the needle to keep them from leaving. But the one thing we did miss is we didn't do enough testing into deciles 2 and 3. And what we found later on is that it's easier to save someone, and the incremental impact that you can have on saving someone and staying at AT&T was better in decile 3 than decile 1. Because decile 1 at the time, we would call them promo surfers, and they were going to leave no matter what you did. So anyway, we missed that initially, and then we came back and got it.
So fascinating. So you're using big data to be a statistician. You wouldn't have been surprised, I assume, to be called a statistician for this. In that, so you're at AT&T for about 5 years, and then where do you go?
Yeah. So the one is I had a killer time at AT&T, and I learned a ton. So I was, I talked about I'd learned my whole life. I wanted to get out there and in the business world, and ironically, that's where I learned the most I've learned, and it was around business and applying things. And so, but at AT&T at the time, you really had to go into sales to move up the ladder. And one of my ambitions was to continue to progress my career and apply some of these analytical skills that I had to other areas. And so I looked within AT&T, but just couldn't find the right opportunity. So I ended up taking a job at a marketing agency, a company called Rapp Collins, who's still around. They're part of Omnicom, which is a large marketing advertising agency. And they wanted me to come to join that group and build their analytics group. And so I joined Rapp, went to Dallas, and was really the second person in that group. And I was at that time, either the senior director or the vice president of analytical services. I can't remember which.
But still, you're still a statistician.
Still a statistician.
Okay. Yep.
And I didn't know if you wanted to talk about my time there, Keith. But anyway, my time there was pretty short. It was a year and a half. And I didn't love the job. And I didn't love the job because at that time, I was treated more like window dressing, which was, hey, analytics it's a lot.
So help me with this. So you're
at
AT&T. You're helping AT&T by doing data analytics for internal questions,
having a real impact. Real impact with Phil.
Okay, so they're running your models, they're trusting. Now you go to Rapp Collins. Are you selling this data analytics to clients, or are you doing it internal for Rapp Collins stuff? You're selling this. You're selling this to clients.
They have clients. Okay. Those clients. What Rapp would do is they would run marketing programs. A lot of how they made their money was buy media. Right. And so they would work for clients like Hyatt hotels, and they would help do better marketing across Hyatt's landscape, and they would be paid to do that. And so I don't know if you want to add something to that, but I know you and I did some work at Hyatt at Rapp, and but I should probably finish the point around why I didn't spend last long there, and the whole window dressing is just because analytics was not really core to what they were trying to do. They weren't really committed to it. A client would say, "Hey, do you guys do analytical services?" And they'd trot me out there, and they'd, I'd give them a little song and dance, and then I'd get put back into my room. Now, that's a little bit of an exaggeration to some extent, because I did do some real work there, but I knew that it wasn't really ultimately what I was looking for there.
I remember we did a really cool change point model trying to predict if somebody hadn't stayed within a certain time, are they going to a different hotel chain?
That's right. Another version of a retention model with a different frequent stayer.
Yep. Okay. So you're not having the impact you'd like to have. So you're there a couple years. So then you leave and you go somewhere else. And
I leave and I go back. I go to a place in Maryland. At the time, it was called Merkle Computer Systems. It was a 80, 90 people person company. So really pretty small, about 10 million in revenue. And they were great at the time was called Merge Purge, which Merge Purge today is called data engineering and bringing data together. But they were experts at combining data. Merge Purge being that they were really good at taking name and addresses, combining them together. So if you have Scott Berry living at 123 Main Street, and Scott David Barry living at 1-2 Main Street, realizing that that's the same person, bringing that together so that when you market to that person, you're not sending two messages out. Sometimes you even see that today where you get emails, the same emails come to your address because they haven't done proper deduping, so to speak. So that's what Merkle was. And the CEO of that company really saw an opportunity in bringing analytics to that data environment for their clients. And we're looking for someone to lead and build their analytical services capability.
Okay.
And so
still you're now at a service company that is selling data analytics to clients, and you're leading that group at Merkle.
Pretty brand new. Our clients weren't expecting that. The organization didn't know much about analytics, and so it was an exciting opportunity. But it also meant I did a lot of education. There's a funny story. I get to Merkle, and I know you guys are going to be surprised at this story, but I get to Merkle, and it's about 2 months in, and I get the opportunity to address the company on what analytical services are. And so and again, it's not a big company; it's about 100 people there. And I knew one of the ladies she worked with me. She was one of the salespeople, and she had a sister that also worked there. And while I'm up there talking, the sister's she didn't know much about analytics. And so finally she says, "I don't get it. Who is that?" And the lady that I knew, she says, "Oh, that's Tim. He's our modeler." She thinks a minute, looks back and forth, says, "Boy, he's not that good looking." And so I spent a ton of time educating people on what analytical services were. They had a lot of nonprofit organizations, and we started to build predictive models for those nonprofits, which is who's likely to be a donor and how much they might give. And there was tons of pushback. This is early 90s, mid 90s. You can't model emotions. So even though you think you can predict who's going to make a decision, we as marketers use emotions to, and they still do it in the fundraising world, to use emotions to get donors. How can you predict that? How can you model that?
It's fascinating. It almost sounds a little bit like Moneyball, where it's the fight between the analytics people and the scout who says, I can look at the guy and his muscle tone and tell you whether he's going to be a good baseball player as opposed to the numbers. So you're a company, and a huge part at this time was getting data. It was who had data, selling data, and so the company's has this amazing data and it curates it, and so it has good data. But now you're selling the service of using the data to make better decisions to companies. Now, does this catch on? Does data analytics catch on for Merkle?
Yes, it does. It took a while. It took, I talk about building a business, and we were really building a business within Merkle. It's like pushing a flywheel. You start to push it, and it's heavy, and it's not going anywhere, and you push it. It's still not going anywhere, and you push it. And finally starts to turn a little bit And then once after you continually push it, then it starts going on its own. And I remember when we hired, it took me about a year to hire 2 people. And then after 3 years, we had almost 80 people in that group, right? Just because data and analytics and statisticians, and hired people with master's degrees, some with PhDs, some with bachelor's degrees, but about 80% of who we were looking for were people with master's degrees and PhDs. And then that continued. That was just 3 years into it. So that continued to grow and scale within Merkle and became a huge part of its value proposition in the marketing arena.
Okay, so you're still a statistician, but now you're leading this group.
Leading the group.
You founded, you're leading the group. And then this grows to a size that your position changes. from statistician to president of Merkle, co-president. Yep.
There was a couple steps in between that, but yes, that's what happened.
Okay.
And important, it would be important to note. So I was out, I spent a lot of time doing customer pitches, right? And I think that's one of the,
selling data analytics. So the
selling data
services
analytics
of
to our
analytics.
clients, trying to convince them that they should spend money on analytics to help them do better things, right? And so as part of that, I connected with a partner, Patrick Hennessy, who was a salesperson at the time. I was the analytics guy. He and I would go out and do customer pitches together. And we just realized that a lot of the skills that I brought to the table helped him, and a lot of the skills he brought to the table helped me. And so we started to combine, we combined our pitches, and then all of a sudden we decided, let's build a group together. So he joined me in helping build the analytics group. And then realizing that we were more effective as what we like to call two in a box. And so then we just continued to progress as Merkle grew, and Merkle ended up scaling to almost $1 billion in revenue. By the time I left, we came at when it was less than 10 million. And then he and I stayed working and leading groups together. And to Scott's point, by the time I had ended up leaving Merkle after about 20 years, I was co-president with Patrick Hennessy.
How big did the data analytics group come by the end of this? What fraction of the $1 billion is data analytics?
It was about, there was a couple of things in there. So we, as you mentioned, we had data that would help. We would sell some data to our clients that would help them get more predictive data. Like we had age and income and occupation and things like that. So that was included in that. But it's about $350 million of the $1 billion in revenue. It's about 35% of that.
Amazing. Now, at this time, and this is, I think you're at Merkle till 2018-ish time. Yep. I think you go to, you spend time in London, you lead Europe, Merkle, and all that. But is there any AI at Merkle before 2018?
Wow. Well, in a word, not as we know AI today, but the way we define AI today, there was tons of it, right? But it wasn't defined as AI. So, and again, so it boils down to the definition of how you want to define AI. Yeah. But there was really an evolution in my life cycle as a business person from when I first started to even as I sit here today, which was there was statisticians. Then they became analysts or analytical folks, right? And back in my day when I was a statistician, if you called me an analyst, I'd be upset with you, right? But it just became a common term. So there was an evolution from being a statistician to then being in analytics to then being a data scientist. And then as we sit here today, data scientists are now AI people, right? AI engineers, AI scientists, because it's the way of the world. But a lot of the things that are going on that we call AI today is fundamental data engineering, data science, statistical work. So,
okay, interesting. So, and now Merkle gets bought, and you stay on there, but then you leave Merkle at this point. And what next?
Yep. Yeah, so I'll bring Patrick in again on that. And so he and I were in the boardroom at Merkle about 2010. Now Merkle got sold in 2018. And if you look at what Merkle is a company, there was a lot of different evolutions of Merkle. And it's an incredibly important lesson that I learned I'm now at a company called Blend, in building and growing Blend, is making sure you evolve and change. And so we were going through one of those changes. And we, as I mentioned, we were a data company that brought analytics in, that had technology. And our secret sauce was data analytics and technology. And most of our clients were in the marketing world. And we had a decision to make that was, hey, where do we go next? Do we want to then stay engaged in the marketing world and evolve our services around what we were calling a addressable marketing agency? Use that superpower of data analytics and technology and apply it in the agency world and apply it in marketing for our clients. We were debating whether we should do that or we should use data analytics and technology and apply it outside of marketing into all kinds of other areas, from healthcare to HR to manufacturing to supply chain. And Patrick and I were voting and arguing that let's do that. Let's bring that superpower to other domains of the business. And there was a heated debating back over a couple of weeks, actually. And in the end, our CEO, David Williams, got to make that decision. And he decided, nope, let's stay within the marketing space. And that was always a point that we said, boy, and then, by the way, that was a good decision for Merkle. And in the end, everybody benefited from that decision. I'm glad that decision was made. But at the time, Patrick and I were saying, when our run at Merkle is over, we want to create that type of company. And so that's, as our run at when Merkle got sold, we both said this is the time to step out and start what we now call Blend.
Okay, so you keep with the two in the box.
Keep with the two in the box.
So you and Patrick go out and you acquire a consulting group that you're going to build into this much broader business outside of marketing. Maybe you'll do marketing, but largely a much broader business aspect of it. And Consultants to Go, I think, is a company C2G acquired, and this becomes Blend at this point. So now by the way, you went from statistician, analyst, data scientist, co-president. Now you're co-founder. And this is Blend 360. And so what is Blend 360?
Yep. Yes. So we had a decision make is we wanted to start this data analytics technology company and apply it to different areas of the business. So we had to decide how we were going to do that. And one way to do it is you plant a flag, say I'm open for business, and you start finding clients, right? Another way to do it is buy a company, gives you a foundation to build off of. You've got people who can do billing. You've got some clients. And so our thinking was, let's see if we can find a company that we could buy that could give us the platform to build the company that we now call Blend, or the company that we were after. And we did. We came across this company called, I haven't heard that name, Consultants to Go, in a while, because as soon as I heard that term, I'm saying, I'm not buying a company that's Consultants to Go. I get a hamburger, I get a consultant. And so we immediately changed it. We changed it for a strong point. We changed it to C2G. And people would say, what does C2G stand for? And we would say committed to growth. And so, but if I go back to the Consultants to Go point, it was about an $8 million company. It had consultants. It had a unique value proposition. It was largely 80 to 90% of the consultants were women, and it was started by two women coming out of AT&T and Amex. That a lot of the women had stepped out of the workforce, wanted to get back engaged in the business, wanted flexibility, wanted to work on their terms, and had great skill sets. So they started to get a Rolodex of these people, and they would then go in and offer them to their clients. And they had some good clients in Citibank, AT&T, Amex. And so that gave us a foundation to build off of. And then we started Blend using that. And we were looking to buy some analytic strength. And we just couldn't find anything that we were excited for. One of our key value propositions still today is we want to just be known for exceptional people. And a lot of the time we just didn't find the quality that we wanted. So we just decided to build that on our own. And so we started the Blend endeavor in late 2017, early 2018, and we scaled. Really, it's a broad value proposition, but we would just go to our clients and say, "You have data here that can help you be smarter. Let us come in there. Let us understand what your business problems are, and then let us apply solutions there that are going to impact your results." And you know what? Sometimes they would say, "I don't know," and say, "Just give us a shot. Don't even pay us. If we're not able to impact your results, you should fire us." And so we would get in there with a pretty aggressive approach there, and then just be able to make sure that we could demonstrate our ability to drive results. And that mentality exists today as well.
I mean, it's fascinating from the time you're at Rapp Collins, where it's an afterthought. Oh yes, we have data analytics. Somebody go find them. To data analytics at the time. Now it's almost like AI is now. Everybody's talking about data analytics. How do we use this data? So an easier sell, but you're still trying to convince companies that the data they have is gold to them, and it can make you better and smarter. So now you're largely building data analytics at Blend. And I know you went out to various schools and brought in whole classes of master's students, for example. And so you're hiring large numbers of statistician data analysts, and this is growing rapidly at Blend now, this part of the business.
Yep. And because when you think of Blend, right now we're about $200 million in revenue. We have about 1,500 employees. And if you think about Blend, we really only have two big areas. We have our people and we have clients. And if we don't have people, our clients have nothing to buy. So we're very much a services-based company, right? And so we said very quickly, we got to make sure that we hire people that people want to buy. We got to be producing talent. And, we would go out and find very experienced people that knew how to do that. But we also said to ourselves, we got to start bringing in great talent, training them up to some extent. And when I say training them up, it's a huge part of what makes a statistician, I'll go back to that term, data engineer, analyst, successful in our world, is understanding the business side of things. And so we would hire people right out of multiple schools. We'd put them in cohorts from 6. We still do this. Like I said, we would. We put them in cohorts of 6 to 10 people. And then for 3 months, we expose them to the business problems. They go through some training around the different tools and technologies that we use that they might not have used in the universities or colleges, right? So there's some of that. There's some exposure to some of the algorithms we have and some of the platforms that we've created. But a big chunk of it is the business problems we're solving. Some of the things I went on earlier in the podcast around, here's some of the use cases, and have them work through that as a team so they can get better understanding of the business side of things and how analytics can help that. So we have that, we call it our all-star program. They go through that 3 months, then we deploy them in 3 months, after 3 months into our clients, and they've got a 3-month trial period. And after 6 months, if they graduate, they make it as full Blend employees. That's been a really great program for us. It's scaled. It's now in LATAM, it's in India, and it's in EMEA as well.
But this is largely in still the data analytics, which still makes up what fraction of Blend today would you? And I know it may be hard, but it is roughly data analytics.
Yeah. So it's better to say what are the capabilities of the people, and so. Pre-AI, about 80%, and if I use 100%, 40% of our people were data scientists. 40% of our people were data engineers. All right. So, in your guys' world, the statisticians more and the data scientists. And that's made up blend. And then the other was client people or marketing people or domain expertise people and so forth. But a large portion was the data and analytics coming together. As you see there today, that's now transformed into, AI engineers and prompt engineers, context engineers. We still have data engineers. We still have some data scientists, but that world's evolving into new titles and new areas.
So you're it's this interesting thing. I asked the question about AI at Merkle because largely, you had data engineers and they were doing things that you might think of that this whole jumping into the AI bandwagon. Now Blend is right where this explosion sort of happens. Are you having similar discussions that you had at Merkle about should we do this, should we do that, about should we be embracing AI, should we be selling AI? Are we an agentic AI creation company? Is that the process and blend of that?
Yeah. One is the marketplace. And I use that term a little bit loosely. Is it the AI marketplace or not? But the world we live in is changing every day, fast paced. And one of the lessons we learned at Merkle was to make sure that we continue to change. And we continue to adapt to what people need, what the trends are, where this business is going. And AI is a huge word these days. And we have transformed ourselves into much more of an AI native shop. But with that said, there's still fundamental roots in the data science and data engineering. And most of our work we do in the AI world is around agentic. AI is developing agents for our clients to help them drive more productive, more efficient business results. And so I heard
what's an example of that without confidential information of something you might build?
A lot of it is around kind of right now it's around back office workflow type stuff. So for example, we did work with a large financial advising firm, and they advise their clients on where the investments they should make, how do they deal with their portfolio. And we're building agentic AI agents to replace what some of the back office researchers would do around the data associated with this to make better recommendations to the financial advisor themselves that then they can go to their clients with. So just replacing the whole process around doing that. It's more efficient, it's more effective, and it requires less, although there's still some of it, less change management. Because one of the things you'll hear in the industry, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard it, is how agents are going to replace people. And we're seeing some of that, but not nearly the extent that the noise is going on. And what's having there's I could probably have multiple podcasts on this and that line. But one of the big things that's hurting that is change management, right? Which is, okay, I got this agent that's more efficient and cheaper than a person. How do I just replace that? It's very hard, and people aren't used to that, and that's going to take some time. And again, we're going to see evolution of all kinds of different things here, but a lot of cool things going on around agentic right now.
Yeah.
But it's not moving. I guess I'll say it again. It's not moving at the pace that the press is talking about.
But forecast a little bit. What is your view on it? And I know 10 years is kind of too challenging, but you're predicting baseball games in the future. You're predicting if people are going to jump from AT&T. What do you think AI is going to look like, though? Is it going to have the huge impact that the press is talking about? We're going to have layoffs. We're going to replace people in 3 years.
Yeah. One thing I'm pretty positive of, and I mean, call me a bit old school, is there's a big paper out there. I wish I remember the name of the paper, but it got a lot of press, especially in the markets, around the unemployment rates going to 30, 40, 50%. AI coming in and replacing jobs. And I just don't, I can't see that happen. I cannot see a world where that we allow that as human beings, that to happen. We just need to be productive. We need to, so that whole Armageddon side of AI can't see happening. Right now, then I say to myself, well, I wonder what, and unfortunately, how old I am, I lived through some of this, the whole tech revolution. Remember back in the 80s and 90s, and I talked about it took us 2.5 weeks to run a logistic regression on a mainframe computer, right? That's a whole revolution that went on. And technology made things so much easier to do, and people were worried about losing their job then. And in many ways, this is just another phase of that, but on steroids. I think this is on steroids compared to that. And the whole on steroids is going to be interesting what that really means and how fast it is. And so I think AI is going to be great. I think it's going to save lives. I love this concept of AI for good. It's going to do some bad things as well, just like technology does some bad things. And so, but hopefully, it'll just be much more of an accelerator for us and make us easier, make our life easier.
So we at Barry are trying to use it to save lives in clinical trials and drug development the whole time. I'm interested in maybe even somewhat thinking of your nephew Cooper. He's going to be a senior next year in college. He's a math major. He's a quantitative kid. People like that, I don't know, scared is the right word. They're uncertain as to what this is. Advice to somebody like that, should they become AI engineers? Is this a skill that everybody's going to have within it? You got to be, I mean, what's advice to your nephew Cooper?
Yeah. It's I get that question a lot. One is, I just wouldn't over-engineer it. Don't, like I can't tell you the people, some of the smartest people I meet in the corporate world that didn't plan to do what they're doing, right? And so you no matter what you do in school and as you're looking into the workplace, your background's important, but I wouldn't over-engineer that because you don't have this skill or that skill that you can't get places. So my advice to someone like Cooper would be aware. Absolutely. The more you can be aware of these technologies, understand them, be knowledgeable in them, can only help you, right? I'm a big believer in learning, even after school. Even I can't tell you how many business books I've read because that became a passion for me. But just get in a spot where you could start to have an impact somewhere. Take a job, right? Start to learn, get your head up around what do I need to do? Where's the business going? Where's the opportunity? Where's the gaps in there? And so I think people tend to worry too much about, I don't have this background, I don't know about you've got the opportunity to get that background in a business. Just get in a spot where you can do it.
Yeah. Fantastic. And I'll go back to, you started this, you left the University of Minnesota saying, I've learned a bunch, I'm ready to go to work. And you probably learned a heck of a lot more working and continue to learn for sure. Yeah. All right. Sure. Fantastic. Well, appreciate you joining us here in the interim.
Yes, hopefully my story could be of some help to people. And, I know some of you are connected to Scott, probably all of you. And I'm always happy to have an additional conversation if you have a certain situation and would like some, advice or how I dealt with it. Open invitation there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Tim. And thanks
for having me, Scott.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And until next time, we'll be here in the interim.